These videos are brought to you by His Vessel Academy. Check us out at hisvesselacademy.com.
In today's lesson, we're just going to do converting simple units. So I want to start with something that you actually know. 1/4 times 4/9. Why can we cross off these two 4s? So if I was to come up here, I could say, okay, if I'm going to solve this, I would cross these two off, and my answer would be 1/9. And I want to show you how that works, because 1 times 4 is 4, right? And 4 over 36, when it's reduced, is just 1/9. So it does work, but I want to make sure you understand that when you mark off those 4s, what you're really marking is making them 1. So make sure you put a 1 there, because 4 over 4 actually equals 1. And since it's the same, like multiplying by 1, 4 over 4, then it actually doesn't do anything to the number. Remember, 1 times any number is that number. So therefore, like 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 15 is 15. So we wouldn't actually have any value that we've added to this by multiplying something by the same. The reason I want to point this out is I want to make sure that the conversions, and you get the idea of it, makes sense. So we're going to do easy conversions. First thing I want to talk about is you should know that 12 inches is 1 foot, okay? And if I have 52 inches, I need to figure out how many feet that is. Or if I have 5 inches, or 5 feet, I want to know how many inches that is. So I want to start with making sure you understand how to use a conversion factor, or a ratio. So we have these 3 feet to 1 yard, or is it 1 yard to 3 feet? Now, the first thing I want you to understand is we're going to go back to that previous one in a minute, because this is literally what we want to do. Okay, we want to have some form of 12 inches over 1 foot. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do for a conversion is we're going to write down what the number is. So we're going to write it up here because this is the numerator. I want to make sure we understand this is the numerator, this is the denominator. All right, and we're going to multiply it by the conversion of either 12 inches or 1 foot. Well, what we are trying to do, because we want to eliminate inches and we want feet to be the answer, so we want feet is got to be, if you think, it kind of makes it logical sense if you ask me. If you put feet here, you know that's what you're trying to get. If you have inches, you're trying to get to feet. And so, or I would have 1 foot equals 12 inches. And how we can tell is we want an inch down here because we want to be able to cross off, because an inch divided by an inch is just 1. And since the inch is down here, we want the feet up here. So you're going to be paying attention to what is in the numerator, and you're going to not cross it off or put it in the denominator so it crosses off. So now we have, so we know that now we are going to be using the second one because I started with inches. I end with feet, so my starting point needs to be in the denominator, and my ending point needs to be in the numerator because that's where it is. All right, so this would be 12 over 1. Now you're probably wondering why we need to have this nice cool little graph. Because we want to know whether or not we're multiplying the number or dividing it. And when if you think about it, if I was to write this whole thing out, and it's kind of cool, if I write this whole thing out, I would have 52 inches times 1 foot over 12 inches, and I would cross off my inches, and that would give me 52 divided by 12 feet. And so that kind of helps you know what you're doing. So if you pick up your calculator and you type in 12 or 52 divided by 12, you're going to get 4 1/3 basically. So 4 1/3 feet is what 52 inches is. Okay? I want to make sure 4.33 repeated. So this would be, right here, would be the 4 1/3. Okay, so we do want to make sure that's the case. So now we're going to start with our 5 feet. Hopefully you kind of get a little bit of a pattern here going. When we have a feet up here, we want one down here. So we're actually going to use this one. Instead, we're going to have 1 foot to 12 inches. And therefore, then our feet disappear because a foot over foot is 1. And now we can tell based on this, both numbers are in the numerator, so we're going to multiply. We can also multiply our denominator, but that's just 1. Remember, this is just going to be over 1. So 1 times 1 is 1, and 5 times 12 is 60. So we're just going to write 60, and that's going to be inches. Okay, so I want to make sure you understand something. When you go from inches to foot, you notice I went from 52, which is a smaller unit, to 4 1/3 right here. Okay, so this was 4 1/3, but I started with a big number, 52. I start with a small number of 5, and I end up with a larger number of 60 when I go from feet to inches. So just make sure you kind of keep that in your mind. So we're going to play a little game here. We're going to see how well you do and see how you understand the concept. Here's a bunch of them. We're just going to call this A, so that way you don't have to write out the number or the words. This is B. You're going to decide, am I using A or B for each of these? So you're going to write 1, 2, 3, 4 on your paper, pick A or B, and see if you can figure out which one. Based on my pattern over here, I'm going to go back to it. Remember, I started with inches, so my inches had to go to the denominator. So my foot ends up in the numerator. I start with feet, so my foot here has to go to the denominator, and I end up with inches in the numerator, which is what I want. All right, hopefully that makes sense and that you can kind of figure out from this point. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can answer these. Okay, because we start with yards, they're going to be in the denominator. We end in feet, they're going to be in the numerator. We start with feet, so it's going to be in the denominator, and we end in miles. We start with inches, hence the inches in the denominator, and we end with centimeters. We start with pounds, and we end with grams. So hence what we're looking at when we're going from one to the next. That may help you figure it out. So we're going to try a couple of these. I want you to go I'm just going to write it in here, 3.5 miles. Okay, and you are going to see over here, there's my conversion rate. Okay, and then I'm going to write here my 2,000 milliliters. And I'm going to look at there's my milliliters to quart, my conversion. And then I'm going to do this 1021.5 grams, and I want that to go to pounds, and there it is right there. And then I have this 100 yards, and I have that right there. So see, just do 1 or 2 of these just to make sure that you know how to do them. Pause the video, and then come back in and I'll give you the answers. There's the answers. You'll notice that I started with miles and ended up with feet, so I crossed off my miles here. I started with milliliters, crossed them off, and ended up with quarts. Started with my grams, ended up with pounds, started with my yard, and ended up with feet. All right, hopefully those made sense. So I knew whether or not I was multiplying or dividing. All of those, so think about this one. The first and the last were multiplication, where the 2 middle were division. Stay tuned to our next video that we're going to create that is on conversion that's a little bit harder, with 2 units.
At His Vessel Academy, we offer live interactive classes as well as some self-paced courses. Visit hisvesselacademy.com for more information and register today.